There's so many different things that we can go back to that would be difficult for the ordinary person to come up with. But there was this battle of ancient times. It was an army of Sacs and Yavanas. Yavanas are Greeks. Saces is this Scythians that we're talking about. And they were battling under Alexander the Great. They were in India, and it mentions that they conquered the Punjab. That's in India. And it mentions a connection between the Sake and the two great Parthian dynasties, the Arsacids and the Sassanids. Each of those two, the Sassanids and the Arsacids, they defeated Rome several times. Here's where we get to the Tartarians we talked about, we promised we'd talk about. The Tartars are a dynasty of the Khazars. And they left their homes on the edge of the Caspian Sea. They became the lords of central India. That's the Scythians. They're the ones that's Israel that were taken to the Caspian Sea. In those very 5 cities that Herodotus and everyone else explains is where the Scythians were. And so the Sake, through the Khazars, called the Kosi of the Dark Ages, the ruling Afghans. We discussed who the Afghans are and where they got their name from the son of Saul of Israel. Those are the so-called Tartarians, which is the dynasty of the Khazars, Khazarians. And they left their homes on the edge of the Caspian Sea. They became the lords of central India in the 6th century to the 10th century. And they are literally the link between the Sakes and the modern descendants of the Bokhara and Afghanistan peoples. So we understand then that the Saki are the sons of Isaac. These are the Israelites who are now being called the children of Isaac, that were taken into captivity by the Assyrians, that joined with the Medes in battle and defeated the Assyrians. And now the historians are saying they go down and they defeat India, the Punjab, and they're connected to these other 2 Parthian kingdoms, the Sassanids and the Arsacids. So now we have a connection with the Israelites to India. They've conquered all of India, the Parthian kingdom, the Medes. They've taken over the Assyrians. We know that they went west. Well, as we have talked about in various videos before this, they then become the Khazars, and history shows that they were Israelites from the Khazarian kingdom. Now we know why. Because these Khazars were really just these ancient Israelites that now, over centuries of time, are known by another name. Sometimes they're called the Umari, because they came from the country of Ephraim, or Israel, the country of Israel, and their capital was Samaria. Other places, there's a connection drawn between the Germani and the Umari, and the Germani becomes the Germans. We've noted the connection that they have with the Goths and the Gothama down in India. These names all refer to either the dispersed ones, the sons of Isaac, the kingdom of Samaria, or different various ways and avenues in which they became known as mercenaries and as soldiers and as warriors. They conquered kingdoms. At one point they become the Mongols, and under Genghis Khan they go and they fight all the way across Europe, all the way across the Ural Mountains. They cross the Caucasian mountains, and in that area they become the Caucasians. They reach the British Isles. We noted the similarities of the Sake with the Mongolians. They're They build these little teepees and they smoke their incense in the teepees. We've noted the similarities that those people have with the Native Americans. Same rituals, the same gods, the same teachings. This is how these very same teachings, these original Sumerian teachings that were furthered on in the Bible by these Jews, by the Israelites, the Israelites had the same teachings, and they brought those teachings all over the world. And now we have these teachings in all of the world, and every one of the ancient religions goes back to the original documents that were handed on from father to son, from Anu to Enki, and then to his son Adam and Noah, and on to the other various lineages that go down through all of the different kingdoms. And then through divine intervention and providence, as the Bible clearly tells us, this divine plan that this angry God throws us out of the garden, and he makes all of these laws and creates slavery, and he's this tutor that leads us unto Christ, that he's the God of vengeance, and they go and they war and they plunder and they push the peoples to the end of the earth according to the prophecies. They push the peoples. Joseph, his blessing was that he would push the peoples to the ends of the earth, and that eventually, one day, he would become all nations, tribes, and peoples and tongues, where this angry God eventually abandons them because of the struggle and the fighting and the wars and all of the vengeance. He just abandons them and divorces them because, you see, in the end, the flesh is weak. The flesh can't really make it. But the great plan is that his son, that inner spiritual man, the Christ, the Logos, his firstborn among many brethren, the Son of God, the only begotten Son, the one that our Father in heaven preferred. See, he didn't prefer the flesh because, it's impossible to please our Father in heaven without faith. And this kingdom, this worldly kingdom, is no part of our Father's kingdom. It's not Jesus' kingdom. If it were his kingdom, he would have fought for it. But he didn't fight for it. He went to the cross and he said, now come and follow me, take up your cross and follow me. So that's what's going to happen in the end, is that where it was said is in the book of Hosea. It tells us, where it was said, ye are not my people, because I've abandoned you upon the hills and the mountains and the streams and the valleys. And you're going to cry in lamentation, and all of your festivals will become festivals of mourning, and you'll have sackcloth on your head. Look at the Buddhists, and they're shaving their heads and wearing these white dirty robes and sitting around mourning. And this is the same thing you find with the monks in Europe and the cathedrals. The popes are wandering around in these long faces and in these dungeons on their knees, praying and full of fear. And hoping and somewhere something good could come out of all of this, but there seems to be no hope, and the world has gone to war after war and world wars, and in the end we'll be redeemed, because that inner spiritual man, once we wake up and recognize him, once we have this revelation that the Apostle Peter had. You are the Son of the living God. Once their eyes became opened and they recognized him. See, once they poured that anointing oil and they got anointed with the Holy Spirit, and inside that temple, those chakras and those 7 candles were lit, and the twin flame, or the tongues, that split into twain upon their head, was lit and was ignited. And the people said, aren't they drunk? It's the 3rd hour of the day. They're not drunk. See, but they have had a spiritual awakening. Their third eye is open. And the whole house where they sat was shaken, because this physical world must come down, just like the walls of Jericho. This is what's so beautiful, friends. This is what's so beautiful about all of this history. Because you can trace the history of all of us. We can trace our history back to Adam. And we are all the chosen, all of us in Christ from the founding of the world. And so, now I want to read you something here. If you go to Google and you Google wiki, Jotland.com, the Goths, Jotland wiki. So Jotland.com, this is a wiki page. It says, the Goths, or the Teutons, were an East Germanic tribe who from the 2nd century settled Scythia. Alright, it says the origin of the Goths. The Goths possibly originated in Scandinavia, more particularly Gotland or Gotaland or Jodanes. They would have become separated from related tribes, the Gutar or the Gotlanders, and the Gotar, which are sometimes included in the term Goths in about the 1st century BC. They migrated southeast along the Vistula during the 1st century, settling in Scythia, which they called Oium Waterlands, from the 2nd century. The capital of their kingdom was the Arium at the Dnieper. In the 3rd century, the Goths split into 2 groups, the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths. Pliny the Elder calls them the Teutones. According to him, they were among the major Germanic peoples. And going down, it says the Goths and the Jats. They originated from Goths who came from Rome and West Italy to India. The highly reputed historian Arnold Joseph Toynbee has advocated it may not be fantastic to conjecture that the Teutonic-speaking Goths and the Goths and the Scandinavia may have been descended from a fragment of the same Indo-European speaking tribes as Hieronymus Getae or the Thys-Getae or the Massagetae of the Eurasian steppe, who are represented today by the Jats of the Punjab in India. The Massagetae we find from Herodotus is a word for the last group of Israelites taken captive by the Assyrians, the second group, which was a much larger group. So the many is what that word means. The many dispersed, the Massagetae. These are, we say this word and they don't know where these words come from. They don't know what they mean, but they're referring to the people that are the Israelites. The Jats trace their descent to the land of Ghazni and the Kandahar, watered by the mother river of the Kushiki race. The Kushiki comes from the word Kush. You can look that up too, and that is a definitive idea amongst the scholars that Kush, the tribe of Kush, his race went all the way up into India. And so this is the Kushki race, the sacred Hutaman or Helmand. Their names connect with the Getae and Thrace, and thence to the Gatons. Then it says Mahabharata Shala Parvya, section 45. Kartikeya was son of Shiva and the brother of Ganesha. He is also known as Skanda, which is where we get Scandinavia. Skanda is believed to give the name Scandinavia. Mahabharata Shala Parva, section 45, describes about all the gods and combatants who came to the ceremony for investing Kartikeya with the status of generalissimo. The list includes not only Jat god, but also the number of combatants of various Jat clans. This has been illustrated in the following shlokas in the online edition of the Mahabharata in Sanskrit. Historical facts. According to the Hukam Singh Panwar, it may not be out of place to mention here, as confirmed by Chaudhary on the authority of the Shiva Stotra. One of the generals of Kartikeya, Skanda, carried the name Jata. It is well known fact that the Deva Asura war Kartikeya, or the Skanda, commanded the forces of the former, and it is quite plausible to believe that the warriors later known as the Panini, the Ganas, led by a general called Jata, became famous as Jat in history. We have every reason to believe that Panini, when used the phrase Jata, Jata, Sangata, denoting union of the federation or the confederation or binding together of many peoples, took this clue from the Jata general's role in forming a unity in the warriors against Asura. Jata general is also believed to give the name Jutland. According to Jat historians Bim Singh Dahiya and Thakur Disraji, the Goths are none other than the Jats. This is basically explaining what we've been talking about, that the ancient history of the Hindus is really the same history as that of Europe. And it's all the same history because the Scythians are the source of all of this, and they're actually Israelites. And so these great gods that warred, and this great god Jata was one of these descendants of Jacob. So it continues on here. It says, Thakur Disraji writes in his book on history of Jats that the country Assyria gets its name from Asyaga, Gothra Jats. The origin of the word Asyag is from Sanskrit word Asi, meaning the sword. According to Kautilya, the people who depended on Asi, or the sword, for their living were known as the Asyag. The Asyags moved from Asgarth to Malwa to Europe. Those who settled the Bangladesh were called the Asyag, and those who moved to the Scandinavia were known as the Asi. The Jats entered the Scandinavia around 500 BC, and their leader was Odin. James Todd considers Odin to be derived from Buddha, or the Bodin. The Asi Jats founded Jutland as their homeland, which is Scandinavia. The religious book of Scandinavia, Edda, mentions that the ancient inhabitants of Scandinavia were Jats, or Jits, and they were Aryans known as the Asi people who came from the land of the Asgath. That's the Assyrians. The Asgath is the site of an ancient fort situated in the Burnhanpur district of Malwa region in the Padya Pradesh in India. Thakur Disraji further quotes Scandinavian writer Mr. Count Johnstone, who says that Scandinavians came from India. According to James Todd, Scandinavia is derived from Sanskrit word Skandinab. And it says here also, it is interesting to note, in the Icelandic saga, the ancient Teutons separated Asia from Europe by a river, or the Vankivisi, which flows into the Black Sea. Eastward across the river in Asia, so legend says, was a land known as Ashiam, or Ashsaland, where dwelt Odin, the chief god, in his citadel named Asgard. However, Asir and all its forms are related to the Sanskrit Asura, which is Assyria, and the Avestian Ahura. This confirms the theory that the country Assyria gets its name from Asag, Gothra, Jats, who came from the Asargar. Alexander Cunningham considers the Jats of India, the Goths of Europe, and the Yuezhi of China as the same people. Yeah, even the people of China are the same people that we call the Goths, that really originated from the Scythians, who were the Israelites, friends. Very interesting. And so, 20 miles from Bombay, there is a Hebrew inscription there, as we said, though there are characters that speak of the Sake, the Dan, and the Gotha. And it talks about them in connection with what happened with King Cyrus. The Sake and the Getae, it says, invades India, and they sprang from the same source as the Saxons and the Goths. And they were the Israelites, as we are proving. If you go further in China, further east, you find Confucius. Confucius was born in 584 BC, right about the same time that Israel was expanding and taking over the world. And as we said, all the nations have the same history. Confucius denounced all the immorality and the degradation that was going on, the immorality, the idolatry. And he also preached this pure religion, just like Buddha did. He told them to treat others with love and as they would desire to be treated, just like Jesus taught. See, they're all the same. The true religion is always the same. It's love, caring for one another. But we have to ask the question at this point. If Israel, then, is in Europe, those are white people. And they're in India, those are brown people. And they're in Africa, as we have said, in South Africa we talked about. And there are other individuals that we could discuss that trace their lineage back to Israel, that are in Africa, down in Ghana and Nigeria, and have these traditions of being Israelites. And there's whole tons of history that we could cite on that. And I think one day we'll do an entire video just on the Israelites that are there in Africa. But if all of these individuals are Israel, how is it that they're all different colors? This is the thing that we need to know. Not because we want to exploit racism, but because we want to know that we're all the children of God. Because you see, racism has already been exploited. That's the problem. We've got to undo all of the pain and all of the lies. We've got to expose it. So that's why we're doing these videos. Not to be racist or to point out, oh, someone's race is special. Because that's not what we're trying to say. What we're trying to say is that the God, Yahweh, certainly did choose a certain race. And they were his chosen ones. Remember, Yahweh is Iyah, which is Inki, Iyah. It's even in the Hebrew, many times written Iyah, Inki, Yahweh, Inki. But they don't translate the word, or transliterate the word Inki. But it's there in the Hebrew many times, where you find the word Yahweh. Inki, Yah, same God. And remember, as we said, Inki is the God that the Bible says there, Yahweh, that's in the garden that creates man. Well, when we get to looking at the actual history that's been kind of missing from our Bible, all the details about who these sons of God were who came and had relations with the daughters of men, and this whole Garden of Eden story, we find out that Yahweh didn't actually just create Adam from the dust. That's more or less a parable. Some of these stories are reduced to a small parable in our Bibles. But it's not peculiar to our Bible. I mean, there are parables in the Bhagavad Gita as well. The ancient stories about the gods that created the universe are reduced to a parable so that we can understand more clearly. Sometimes, like we said, it's a Reader's Digest version. So, we get to thinking then in Christianity and in Judaism that Adam was just created out of the dust. He's just a bag of bones from the dirt, a worthless nothing. Well, that's not what the Sumerian tablets teach. There were individuals that stood upright on this planet. What we're going to find is that those individuals are of a certain race. Because this planet is a certain distance from the sun. There's a lot of sunshine, especially in places like Africa, the Sahara Desert. After thousands and thousands of years of being in a very hot desert, the individuals who evolved from that began to have a lot of melanin in their skin, and they began to turn very dark. Well, the people on Nibiru, being on a planet that is farther from their sun, they were in a very cold and dark planet, and they turned white because of evolution. It says that, even in our Bibles, it says that Jehovah was walking about in the cool of the day. And you probably wonder, what does that mean? Well, it's a Reader's Digest version. It's missing an explanation as to why Jehovah was walking about in the garden during the cool of the day. Because you see, on earth, the sun is out a lot. And this god, Enki, being from Nibiru, really didn't like the hot sun very much because he was too white and he would get burned. That's all given to us. That information's in the Sumerian tablets. So you can see the benefit of having the Sumerian tablets. When we see that our Bible just says, Yeah, Jehovah had to walk around in the cool of the day, but we don't know why. And we see that there was 4 rivers that issued out of Eden. And it says one river went around the land of Havilah, where the gold was good. Why does it mention the gold and then never speak again about gold in the New Testament, or in the Genesis account, really? Well, in the Sumerian account, it tells you that the gods came here to mine the gold, and they made the humans to become slaves. Well, that's a very important detail that they left out. And this explains the mystery that the Apostle Paul was talking about, the tree that was made, and the grafting into the branches, and the children of Israel, and the chosen, and all of this. Turns out that humans some of their genes were taken. A little bit of their genes, a little bit of Enki's genes, were spliced together, and a little bit of Ninhursag's genes, and they were put into the womb of Ninhursag, was a goddess from Nibiru. And so the children that were born from that union looked a lot like, the Adam that was born from that union looked a lot like Enki, who was a white man from Nibiru. And we also find the story of Noah. It's in the book of Enoch. If you read in the book of Enoch, you'll find that Noah was white. It says specifically that his skin was as white as snow, because he was the son of Enki. So, this is important information that we would like to know. And why is it important for us to know? Because now we've got a reason why this particular race was preferred above other races, and why Cain was banished. Well, the real reason why Cain was banished, because you see, Eve wasn't made, according to the Sumerian tablets, Eve wasn't really made from Adam, but was from Ninhursag too. But there was a different occurrence when they made Eve. Our Bible is more or less a parable about the creation of Adam and Eve. But there's something to the effect that Eve was a little different than Adam. And since Eve's genetic splicing had more of the indigenous peoples, she was probably of a darker skin. We don't know that for sure. That part isn't explained to us. But what we know is that Cain killed his brother Abel because he was the firstborn. And the gods on Nibiru didn't know that Enki had been messing around with these individuals on this planet. It was forbidden for them to do so, because they thought that that would just complicate matters so much, because Enki was the heir to Nibiru. And if he had a son, his firstborn son was a human, then that human would be an heir to Nibiru. So you see, Adam was really the heir apparent. Well, people on Nibiru didn't know what to do. And so Enlil, in his confusion, thought he'd better just kill everybody, because this was a mess, and it was forbidden. But the Creator of all intervened, and as we've talked about in other videos, and there's more details in other videos, and you can read those accounts in the book of Enoch and in the Sumerian tablets. But suffice it to say that Enki was persistent. And there was another child that was born as well. And this was Marduk. This was Enki's son, Marduk. Marduk took a wife. He didn't just have relations, but he actually took his chief wife, was a human, was Enoch's daughter. And the gods didn't want him to do that, so they said that Marduk could not be an heir to Nibiru, even though Enki was the heir, and his son Marduk would then therefore be the heir. But he gave up his right to rule because he wanted to have a wife, and he was stranded on this earth, and he was lonely. So he took a woman that was from the earth. Well, they said, if you're going to do that, you can't be the heir. So, because he did that, there were 600 individuals, astronauts basically, that were living on Mars, that were in charge of all of this mining of the gold. And they were getting tired of mining. And so they decided, like their, protege, Enki, hey, let's do something to relieve ourselves. And we want, first of all, we want wives and we want children. So 200 of the 600, a third of the angels of heaven, the Bible says, well, they're not really the angels. They're not really all of man. Well, they're not really all of the beings in the universe, you see. Not all of God's children fell. No, not a third of all God's children. But only 200 of these individuals fell. And their fall was this. They came. There was this big wedding going on. And they were invited to the wedding, and they came. And they said, because Marduk took a human wife, we want to do the same. And so the gods were saying, see, Marduk, what you did? Now look what you started. And Enki said, well, my son Marduk did it. They have the right to do it too. So you see, it's not as clear-cut as you might think. In our Bible, it's like, well, they were just evil. But the Sumerian tablets gives us the rest of the story. There's a reason why they did what they did. But they did indeed disobey. And they made a pact on Mount Hermon. So you see in the Bible, we've got Og, king of Bashan, who was a great big 16-foot giant. Okay, who's Og, king of Bashan? Well, we find out in the Bible that Bashan, another name for it is Mount Hermon, and that's where the Apocrypha and the Sumerian tablet says that these 200 came down and rebelled. And this is where they ended up, after the flood, going, their descendants, the Samjazi, they survived, and they went up in there and they made a certain area where they lived, and they took their wives, their human wives. So there's a lot more that we don't know. Well, in the Sumerian tablets, it tells us that some of Cain's children ended up marrying in to these giants. And so, for a long time in the Sumerian tablets, it tells us that they forbade them to have any more marriages and so forth. But it seems like nobody could stop this. And then finally, Enki comes down again, Yahweh, and he seduces another woman on earth, and this woman is Noah. And it says in the book of Enoch, as well as the Sumerian tablets, word for word in the book of Enoch, though, which is quoted by Jesus and the apostles, the book of Jude, the book of Revelation, the book of Peter. But it says that Noah's skin was as white as snow. Throughout the Bible, you have these little paragraphs that are very uncolloquial. They are not normal. They're little odd sayings, little paragraphs that appear. Here's one of them. Noah, it says, had his skin as white as snow. Well, this is very similar to a verse in Daniel, chapter 7, where the Ancient of Days has, his beard is as white as wool. But it doesn't mention the color of the Ancient of Days or his sin. Now who is the Ancient of Days? Joseph Smith tells us that the Ancient of Days is Adam. See, he's not eternal, but he is a very ancient one, and his son is given the kingship. He's the heir to everything, and the Son of Man shall come, and he shall appear before the Ancient of Days and receive the throne of this world. So this is what this is talking about. This is the theme. This is the great mystery. Who will be the Messiah? Well, we know the Son of Man is Jesus. Okay, so what does it mean? Was Jesus white then? Noah was white, and his father was Enoch, who was white. Well, don't worry, friends, because this is the thing that the Creator of all came to make sure did not happen. The indigenous peoples on this earth were probably dark-skinned people. We know that they were because the Sumerian tablets talks about them as the black-headed peoples. And it says that a group of them lived over in the area of Babylon. And they were called, or the Sumerians were called the black-headed peoples. And they were the ones that this god Ea began to use as slaves. Well, as we've shown, friends, in many videos that we've been doing, Solomon, his father was David, and his mother was Bathsheba. And we've traced her to a descendant of Cush, and we've proven that Cush was a black person. And so Solomon's mother was black. And in the Song of Solomon, we find that there's one of these uncolloquial paragraphs, this little odd paradigm in there that states that someone had the hair that was white like wool. Sort of a little parable like that. And it says that Solomon was ruddy. Remember, ruddy is the word Edomi. Edom. It comes from the word Adam, red earth. What does that mean? Well, all of a sudden, before it says that Noah's skin was white. Now it's just saying he's Edom, and he's pleasant, or he's good looking. He's very good looking and handsome. It says that Solomon is very ruddy. Well, go back to the book of Enoch, the description of Noah. It says that his skin was as white as snow, but then it says, and as red as a rose, a blossoming rose. Well, what could that mean? If you're going to describe someone as white, and then say as white as snow, evidently what you're saying, because if you look around in the world, there's not a lot of things that are pure white. If you said clouds, well, some clouds are gray. If you said, water, because it's clear, well, sometimes water looks blue. What would you say? What example would you give of how white this person was? Well, if you say he's as white as snow, or wool, perhaps, clean wool, one description is, in Daniel chapter 7, it says his beard is like clean wool. In other words, very white. Pure white. Then why would you then, in the next sentence, say, and as red as a blossoming rose? Well, the only way to make sense of that is to say that his skin was pure white, but yet something else about his skin was red. That would only make sense if, well, you see the example of individuals that you've probably met before that are pure white. Just very, very white complected. But when they are embarrassed, they blush, and what shines through is the red, the blushing. So evidently Noah was very white with red blushes on his cheeks. But you see, it doesn't say that about David. It says he was ruddy. Now, it says that Adam was made from the red earth, but it doesn't say what color he was. But it says that Solomon was ruddy. It says that Esau had red hair. That's why they called him Edom, or red. Some of the translations say he was red all over. All right, but it doesn't say he was white. It says he was red. And it says that he had hair. And we determined that sign that Cain received was his lack of hair. And we've determined that there are certain races that have this mark, that are very hairless. They don't grow beards like some of the American Indians and tribes in Africa. So we get these conundrums, like Esau is red. Lots of people want you to say, or want you to believe, that when someone's ruddy, then they must be white. But think about it. Ruddy, if it means red earth, what is red earth? I mean, look at the ground. What color is it? Well, it's various colors. It could be brown. It could be dark brown. But it's brown. Probably a reddish brown. But it's not white. And there's nothing about rosy red there. It's just dirt red. So, someone who's ruddy, certainly not necessarily white. And as we've seen, we know their genealogy. Solomon wasn't white. He was half black and half white. So you might say then he was that original color of the earth, brown, very ruddy and very handsome. So So Solomon then, we have seen, is half black and half white. We've also seen that the birthright was given finally to Joseph, and then to his firstborn son Ephraim. And as we've said in Hosea, Ephraim is a cake not turned. So Ephraim then, we find, is the child of the union of Joseph and Asenath. And Asenath was a daughter of Shechem, who was a Canaanite. And we determined he was black. So the birthright then is always given. Noah was the first one from the union of Enki with this human that was from Adam. So very clearly Noah could have been white. And it specifically says he was. And of course Enki had in mind that Noah's children would rule the world. And he chose Abraham for that very reason. And Abraham's great-grandfather was Laban. And as we've said, Laban means white. So Enki had a plan that he would choose this line and they would rule the world. But guess what? Our father had a plan, because it tells you in the Sumerian tablets that Galzu, an emissary from the creator of all, came and thwarted the plans of Enki at every turn. He ended up telling Enki, I want you to save these people. I don't want you to kill them all. Because Enlil and Enki were planning on having a great flood. And the creator of all told Enki, I want you to save the children of Cain as well. The children of Seth and the children of Cain got in the boat. And the children of Cain got in through Naamah, who was Noah's concubine. Of course, the Sumerian tablets also mentions that there was a group of Cain's descendants over in America that got through anyway. They weren't destroyed in the flood. They survived. So evidently the flood wasn't completely universal all around the world. So that's another little point that's not in our scriptures. There's quite a few descendants of Cain that survived, one way or the other, by divine intervention from our Father in heaven. So we know then that by a divine plan, even though Yahweh wanted to make these laws and slavery and all of this stuff, and he told Abraham, make these sacrifices, and I'm going to make a law and so forth. But our Father in heaven came 430 years before the law was ever given through Moses, and came to Abraham, and it says that Melchizedek met Abraham, who was a priest of the Most High, El Elyon, not of Yahweh. And the Most High God made a promise to Abraham that he would give him a blessing. And all the nations, every nation, no chosen nation, just all the nations shall be blessed through Abraham. So you see, even then, our Father in heaven had a plan to thwart the other God in his doings, to try and make all men as slaves, and to have his son, through Enki, rule the world. So our Father said, yes, they are the heir, but I'm not going to let only Nibirians, a very pure race back to Nibiru, rule the world. See, Nibiru is going to rule the world, half of the world, part of the world. But the indigenous peoples of this earth, they get to rule part two. I'm going to make it equal. I love them both. I love them all. And in the end, by divine providence, our Father had Jacob put his right hand on Ephraim and his left hand on Manasseh. And he said, I know, my son. Manasseh shall be a great nation too. But Ephraim is going to get the blessing. And he's going to be a multitude of nations in all the earth. And I'm going to bless him like the stars of heaven and like the sands of the sea. And like the book of Revelation chapter 7 says, that no man should be able to number him, of all tribes and nations and tongues. The great blessing will go to the brown-skinned people, to all peoples. And so this leads us to Revelation chapter 1 and verse 14. And it says that Jesus had white beard like wool. And it says that his feet and his legs were like burnished brass or copper. Some have said that refers to Jesus being a black man. You say, well, that's not talking about the color of his skin. My goodness, People don't have the color of brass as skin. Well, do people have the color of snow as skin? It specifically says that Noah's skin was as white as snow. And the Ancient Days says he had the hair of his face that was white. Well, there's quite a few of these little parables, little sayings that describe the heirs throughout the Bible. One of them is in Ezekiel, I think chapter 8 or 9. And Ezekiel says he saw this man with linen, wearing linen, very white suit. Remember, the Ancient of Days also had a garment that was white, pure white, as well as his skin being pure white. But Ezekiel sees this man wearing linen, and he's got a writer's inkhorn on his belt. See, in other words, he was a scribe, a priest. He's wearing a linen. He's a priest, a man of authority. He represents one of these angels, someone from Nibiru. And he describes him as having feet and his legs like brass or copper, just like what we find in Revelation 1:14. But it also mentions his arms being brass or copper colored. And it describes his eyes. A lot of times it'll describe their eyes as, well, the book of Enoch says that Noah's eyes were like flashes of lightning. Now, sometimes you get the wrong translation, and it'll say, like a couple times in the Bible, it'll say their eyes were like lights, or they were glowing or something. You think, what kind of eyes would be, you must not even have been a real human, right? To have eyes that are shining a light or something. No, it's not saying that. It's saying that when you looked into their eyes, they sparkled like little flashes of light. It was brilliant. Okay. And then that same kind of wording is described when it talks about their skin. It says it looked like fire or little flashes of lightning, like burnished brass. Well, that actually describes some very beautiful brown people that have this most amazing skin tone. One place in the Bible it says that their skin was like topaz. Another time it says like beryl. Well, they're not really sure what that means, but again, it probably means brown or amber color. And in the same place where it says that their skin was like topaz or beryl, it says it's got like little flashes of lightning. So it describes their skin like flashes of lightning. Like it's sparkling, like it's just glazed, like metallic. You don't see white people with metallic looking skin, but a lot of times you'll see dark colored peoples that have the most amazing bronze looking skin. And it is beautiful. But it's clearly not a white color. It's clearly saying something different. Now why? Why would it be saying that? Well, the evidence is clear. Enki was white from Nibiru because of his planet being further from his sun. And the indigenous peoples, they lived in a land, in a place where their sun is very, very hot. And they had to walk about at the cool of the day. Their skin, through the evolution of their species, became very dark. And so, this is why they were very surprised when Noah was born. And they said, he looks like one of the children of the angels. It says that in the book of Enoch. He looks like a children of one of the gods. Like one of the angels. See, they're white. But there were a lot of people. Remember, children of Cain were on the earth. And they were mixing. And there were lots of people on the earth that didn't have such white skin. So when they saw this child, Noah, they thought, boy, this is different. He looks like he could be one of the Nephilim, one of the children of the fallen angels. So the Bible makes it very clear that Jesus was born from a virgin. Remember, this has happened over and over again, all the way through the Bible. Enki was a god, had relations with one of these women on earth, and produces Noah. A virgin birth. Isaac was, his mother couldn't have children. Sarah couldn't have children. She was 100 years old when she gave birth. It was a miracle. Samuel, same thing. Samson. All these miracle births. And what was it for? Well, remember, Enki kept trying to insert his seed into the line because he wanted to rule the world. But our Father in heaven, by his divine persistence and his love, kept changing it. And he told Jacob, no, switch your hands. Put the right hand over on Ephraim, the son of the Canaanite. Say, wait a minute now. Jehovah said, you can't marry the Canaanites. And Sarah says, Hagar's son Ishmael's not going to have any inheritance with my son. That's what they thought. That's what they believed. That's what they wanted. But our Father in heaven overruled it. And Jacob got the blessing. Not Esau. See? And he got Cain through the flood too. And he ended up having children, Canaanites. And he ended up making the birthright go to a descendant of Cain, as well as a descendant of the gods. Because you see, Jesus was half man and half God. And so always is this indigenous woman. And as I've said in other videos, and this is going to surprise many peoples out there, and we don't got time to get into this in this video, but the Bible says that there was a woman named Cleo that was at the foot of the cross. And without going into that deeper, friends, that is a shortened name of Cleopatra. And that is Mary. And Cleopatra was an Egyptian woman. And just like Sechem being a black person, just like Moses who married the Ethiopian, a Cushite woman, and Aaron and Miriam took him aside and said, now Moses, you can't be doing that. But you see, by divine inspiration, Moses being the Ramses, a pharaoh who ruled over Upper Egypt or Lower Egypt, which was Northern Egypt, the land of Goshen. The pharaohs, Amun-Hoseph, which was Joseph, who married the daughter of Anu, was the line of the kings. By divine providence, the line of the kings came down to Joseph. And then to Moses. And Moses, to keep that line going, goes and marries an Ethiopian, a Cushite. And then he married another woman, a Midianite. And they didn't like that one either. And there's stories in the book of Jasher, the book of Enoch, that explains further what really that means. It's deep, but we don't got time to get into it. But it's definitely because our Father in heaven was trying to preserve all his children and their seed. And so who was Jesus? Well, his mother was Cleopatra. And Cleopatra was the reincarnation of Isis. Read your history book. Her son, when he was born, Cleopatra, read it in history. This is not in the Bible. This is, well, it's in the Bible, but, I'm describing history to you. Cleopatra's son, she had a child. The father, we don't know. We don't know the father of Cleopatra's son. But when Cleopatra's son was born, they declared him the Son of God, the last of the Pharaohs, the last of the lineal descendants of the Pharaohs, which means the house of God. And in history, she named that child Caesarion, and in history, he disappears. And it says that she named him IES, which is an anagram of Isis, Seb, and Horus. And he was the Son of God, the last of the Pharaohs. But he said, if my kingdom were a part of this world, I would have fought for it. But as it is, my kingdom is no part of this world. And he is He did his job and he did his work. He came to the earth and he suffered and he died. And then, of course, the devil steps in. Augustus Caesar, who claimed that he was adopted by Caesar, and he sequestered his name, Caesar, Augustus Caesar, right? Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar. Well, he was the son of Julius Caesar. He wasn't the son of our Father in heaven, not the rightful heir. And the Caesars, though a lineal descendant back to Adam, they think they're going to rule. But remember, all the way through the Bible, it's our Father in heaven that raises up kings and takes them out. And he had all of this worked out. The destined heir to this world was Jesus Christ. Isus. Sus being the ending of the Greek word, the tense of the word. The actual name is I-E-S. Is. The son of Isis. The son of God. And his beard was as white as wool. He was half God and half Egyptian. And his skin was like burnished brass. And his arms was like burnished brass. Beautiful thing, friends. But we need to know that all nations are included in the promises of our Father in heaven, whether you're white or black, whether you're from Nibiru, your ancestors, or whether you are the indigenous original owners of this earth. We all go back to our Father in heaven. And it was through that one man that all nations on the face of the earth were made. And through the one woman, Eve, the mother of all living. And the father of Adam was indeed this Ea Enki, and his father is Anu. And we are the heirs, joint heirs with Christ, and heirs of God. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Well, I'm going to go ahead and go, friends. This will probably be the last in this series, and we may still cover some of this, because I still want to get back to, there's so many other ins and outs of this, but we could spend an endless number of videos covering this in a series, but I think we'll get off of this for now and do a little bit of some other things for a while, but we'll get back to this subject. Anyway, this is David Vos. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good day.